s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le Senator Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le Senator Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le Senator Ferguson. Monsieur le Senator Lefondre.
Say present.
Monsieur le Senator Lefondre. Madame le Senator Valois.
Present.
Madame le Senator Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Senator Pallet.
Présent.
Monsieur le Senator Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément. Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Southern.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Lewis.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Tadier. Monsieur le Deputy Higgins. Monsieur le Deputy Masson. Madame le Deputy Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Martin.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Doublé.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Labbé.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Wickenden.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Truscott.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Young. Monsieur le Deputy Ash.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Morel.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy Guida.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le Deputy de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Hegera.
Present.
Monsieur le Deputy Aye.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Pershar. Monsieur le Deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le Deputy Alves. Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin.
Present. Sorry.
Monsieur le Deputy Pamplin. Madame le Deputy Gardner.
Present. Present.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit que toute leur délibération est ton accompagnée de la bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être et au soulagement du peuple qu'il te plut de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions, mon nom, et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en décembre. Notre Père, qui est aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne. Ta volonté soit faite dans la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi, la reine, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame le Senator Ferguson.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Senator Lefondre.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément,
Excusez.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Marie, Monsieur le Député Tadier,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Député Higgins,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Député Masson,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Député Young,
Présent.
Madame le Député Pershar,
Excusez.
Monsieur le Député Pamplin.
Excusez. Les États sont constitués. Very well. Before we continue with public business, I was asked by Deputy Gardner yesterday to review, pursuant to Standing Order 12.2a, the answer to written question 164. The test that I apply is whether the answer is directly relevant to the question. The question asked the Minister for Health and Social Services in connection with the costs and expenditure on the open cell COVID-19 laboratory from the 18th of August last year to the present time, and a number of categories were set out in the question. The question deals with all of the categories. Direct answers are given to subparagraphs A and D of part A and D of the answer, and general answers to parts B and C. Parts B and C, the total sum is given, and the daily increment is given, but the individual costings are not, on the grounds that they are commercially sensitive. The test that I have to apply is, as I have said, whether or not the answer is directly relevant to the question, and it seems to me that the question of commercial sensitivity is a question for the person answering the question, and not something on which the presiding officer is capable of making a judgment. In any event, in my judgment, the answer is directly relevant to the question, and accordingly, I rule it to be in order. We now continue with public business, and the next item of public business is the draft road traffic number 66 Jersey regulations P15 lodged by the Minister for Infrastructure. The purposes of the debate, the main respondent is the chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Road Traffic number 66 Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Order in Council of 26th of December 1851 and Article 92 of the Road Traffic Jersey Law 1956.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I will begin by noting that there's currently only one Coast Guard vehicle used for emergency purposes. In the United Kingdom, the search mission coordinators of the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centres are permanently based at their respective operations rooms and are supported by teams of mobile Coast Guard officers. The situation in Jersey is quite different in that the duty harbour master carries the search mission coordinator role 24/7, unsupported by other mobile assets, and therefore may have to attend from home or elsewhere. The search mission coordinator is under pressure to attend at short notice to emergencies being limited to certain speeds, which will increase response time, which has implications for the safety of life at sea. So some time ago, the Minister for Home Affairs approved the use of flashing warning lights on Coast Guard vehicles when on emergency call-outs. The decision was made subject to the proviso that the Coast Guard drivers were not to be subject to the exemption contained within the Traffic Signs Order 1968, nor to the exemptions under the article in the Road Traffic Law 1956, which applied to other emergency vehicles. The rationale for not extending these exemptions at the time was that the Coast Guard driver training level were not as high as other emergency services. So in 2015, it was confirmed that the Coast Guard drivers were qualified Institute of Advanced Motoring Advanced Drivers and had undertaken and passed a Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents accredited training blue light training course. It was therefore decided that all exemptions applying to other emergency service vehicles should be extended to Jersey Coast Guard vehicles and the executive officer. One of the reasons for the delay in progress since 2015 was that during the process of preparation of the amended legislation, a defect in the existing legislation was found, which required an amendment of the Road Traffic Law 1956 to correct both the existing provision relating to traffic signals and emergency vehicles and consequently Road Traffic Order 1968. The draft regulations would make the amendment as well as making the changes necessary to enable the application of the blue light exemptions to the Coast Guard. So in addition, the draft regulations will, A, insert a definition of Jersey Coast Guard service in the 1956 law, which refers to Article 2 of the Harbours Law 1961 and update the current references in the law to the fire service by inserting a definition of the fire and rescue service, which refers to the current legislation, namely Fire and Rescue Service Law 2011. B, amends the provision in the 1956 law, which exempts vehicles used for fire, ambulance, and purposes from speed limits in emergency situations to include vehicles used by the Jersey Coast Guard. C, amend the provision in the 1956 law, which enables the Minister to make orders exempting drivers of vehicles used for fire, ambulance, and police purposes from complying with road traffic signs, so the Minister can include vehicles used by Jersey Coast Guard. This also corrects the problem identified in 2015 by altering a cross-reference, so the reference in the order making power to traffic signs include traffic lights. Once the draft regulations have become law, changes can be made to the existing orders relating to the fitment and use of warning signs and the use of warning lights, which will be necessary if Coast Guard vehicles are allowed to exceed speed limits and overrule traffic signs and signals in order to ensure as far as possible the safety of other road users and the public. Other emergency service vehicles are already covered by such measures. So the Road Traffic Miscellaneous Amendment to Coast Guard Vehicle Order 2021 would A, amend the Motor Vehicle Order 1998 so that the prohibition in that order from fitment of a bell, gong, siren, two-tone, or to a motor vehicle does not apply to Coast Guard vehicles. And B, amend the Road Traffic Order 1998 so that Coast Guard vehicles are included in the definition of emergency vehicles. That order allows emergency vehicles to be fitted with blue flashing lights. And C, amends the Road Traffic Signs Order 1968 so that drivers of Coast Guard vehicles are not guilty of offences for failing to comply with traffic lights and traffic signs, providing certain conditions are met. There, I will conclude by thanking the transport officers who have worked in partnership with Justice and Home Affairs and the Law Officers Department to undertake this work. I trust these changes will assist the Coast Guard and Harbour Master to best protect life at sea. Sir, I urge members to support this deregulation, sir. Sir, I make the regulations.
Thank you very much, Minister. Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? Connétable Brillard.
Thank you, sir. This is a sensible move to regularise a position which has evolved as a result of governmental changes. My personal experience, sir, as a deputy launching authority with the RNLI has proven to me that it is essential that the Coast Guard officials are enabled with training to attend emergency situations which may arise around the coast. These situations arise very often as a result of calls from the public to the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard can't establish exactly what the situation is very often until they attend on site, and timing can very often be of the essence from a life-saving point of view. So in summary, sir, I urge members to support this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy of St Martin. I beg your pardon, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. It was just to say that I know the Minister made reference to this in his speech, but in the UK, this has been the case for Coast Guard vehicles for some time. I know back in 1992, 93, I was a member of the Coast Guard service in the UK, and it was a Coast Guard service attached to a school where you had 18-year-olds alongside with a teacher attending emergencies, and it was always a blue light emergency. So it strikes me that if in 1992 it was possible the Coast Guard operated as a blue light service in the UK, then it is about time that we did the same in Jersey. So I'll be supporting the Minister on this one, sir. Thank you.
Much indeed. Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to add very much more to what the Minister and the Deputy and the Constable have said. It is vital that Coast Guard, as the coordinating person in charge of search and rescue, is able to access these areas quickly, and blue lights on their vehicles will be essential. So I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Well, does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Do other members wish to speak on the principles? I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Yes, I thank the Constable of St Brelod, Deputy Morell, and the Deputy of St Martin for their kind words and comments, sir, and congratulate them on their public spiritedness in assisting search and rescue in the past and present. I make the regulations, sir.
Very well. I ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. And I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 36 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and 4 further votes pour noted in the chat. Do you wish to deal with the matter? Sorry, does the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise the matter?
No, thank you, sir.
And how do you wish to propose the regulations, Minister, in second reading?
En bloc, please, sir.
Do you wish to speak to them?
I don't think there's much more I can add, sir. As Deputy Morell said, it's a long time coming, but there was quite a bit of consequential work that needed doing. So I'm delighted to bring it before the Assembly today, sir.
Are the regulations seconded in second reading?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on any of the regulations in second reading? No member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and ask the greffier to place a voting link into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in second reading, 37 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and I note further 3 votes pour in the chat. Do you propose the matter in third reading, Minister?
Yes, please, sir.
Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? No member. Connétable and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. Just to thank the Minister and his team for regularising this position, which I have to say has been out of sorts for some time, and I can assure members that it will be to the benefit of the general public in ensuring safety at sea. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wishes to speak in third reading? Then I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Indeed, thanks, sir. I don't think there's much more I can add. Thank members for their comments and their support, sir. Amid regulation.
Much. Ask the greffier then to place a link into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in third reading, 38 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstention in the link, and a further 1 vote noted pour in the chat. Very well. We now move to the draft Intellectual Property and Registered Rights Amendment, Disability and Rights Performances, Jersey Regulations P9, lodged by the Minister for External Relations and Financial Services. For the purposes of the debate, the main respondent is the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Intellectual Property Unregistered Rights Amendment, Disability and Rights and Performances, Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 44, 243, 274, 401 and 409(1) of the Intellectual Property Unregistered Rights Jersey Law 2011.
Minister.
So I'd like to ask my Assistant Minister, the Connétable St Warren, to act as rapporteur for this item, please. Thank you.
Yes, Connétable St Warren.
Thank you, sir. So on the 18th of November 2020, my minister brought the draft intellectual property unregistered rights Marrakesh Treaty Jersey Regulations 2020, the Marrakesh Regulations, to the States as an opportunity arose to join the Marrakesh Treaty at short notice. This was connected to the end of the Brexit transitional period on the 31st of December 2020. As members will recall, the Marrakesh Treaty is an international convention with a clear humanitarian and social development dimension, which introduces mandatory exceptions to copyright for the benefit of the blind, visually impaired, otherwise print disabled. The treaty creates an international framework that allows the production and distribution of so-called accessible copies of works, such as Braille or large print, for the benefit of people with vision-related disabilities. The Marrakesh regulations were adopted unanimously on the 18th of November last year. Joining the Marrakesh family not only assists visually impaired people in Jersey, but also people with other such disabilities in other countries that have joined the treaty, as it recognises the importance of exchanging accessible copies across national borders by organisations that serve visually impaired people. Therefore, joining the treaty also has an international social development dimension, as the overall available supply of accessible copies around the world increases with each country joining the treaty. However, the Marrakesh Treaty only sets out minimum standards for the benefit of people who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. And we're very grateful to the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, who raised an important point during a briefing on the 21st of October. We completely agree with all the comments made by the previous chair of the panel, giving all disabled people better access to cultural and informative materials is the right thing to do. During the debate on the 18th of November, the Minister therefore informed members that officers were being requested to prepare further legislative amendments to ensure that accessible copies of any type of copyright work or recording of performance can be made for the benefit of people with any type of disability. In accordance with the Marrakesh Treaty, the Intellectual Unregistered Jersey Law 2011 IPEL currently includes exceptions that allow visually impaired people and organisations acting on their behalf to make accessible versions of literary, dramatic, musical or artistic works without infringement of copyright. However, these exceptions do not include films, broadcasts or sound recordings. For example, this means that they do not permit the making of an audio description that enables a visually impaired person to access a film. In addition, where a work contains a performance, the performer will also have rights to how the work is used. The IPEL currently only contains a very limited exception to performance rights, only allowing designated bodies to make subtitle copies of recordings of broadcasts for the benefit of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, physically or mentally handicapped in other ways. This exception does not apply currently to other types of work. As a result of these limitations, some disabled people in Jersey may still be unable to access certain types of copyright works or recordings, performances, which means that they may be unable to participate in our society, culture and economy as easily as other people. Therefore, I am now bringing the draft intellectual property unregistered disabled rights in performances Jersey regulations to the States, which if approved, would broaden the scope of the IPEL disability exceptions to give disabled people greater access to informative and creative content. Specifically, the draft regulations would allow accessible copies to be made of any type of copyright work or recording of performance for the benefit of people with an impairment, and if and to the extent the impairment prevents them accessing the work or recording. Broadening the scope of the IPEL disability exceptions is also consistent with the evolving concept of disability recognised in the preamble of the Convention on Human Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This convention, which has been joined by 182 countries worldwide, enables that disability results from the interaction between persons with impairments and attitudinal environment barriers that hinders their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. Broadening the scope of the IPEL disability exceptions is therefore the right thing to do, as it will give disabled people better access to cultural and informative materials, and more generally allow them to live a more fuller life. Furthermore, the draft regulations are all about simplifying the processes and procedures related to the IPEL disability exceptions, In addition, the draft regulation contains a small number of changes to the IPEL for the purposes of removing any uncertainty regarding Jersey's compliance with the Marrakesh Treaty. So I propose the principle.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak on the principles. Then the debate is closed, and I ask the greffier to put a voting link on the principles into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 37 votes for, no votes contra, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote for noted in the chat. Does the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise this matter?
Thank you. No, sir. As the Assistant Minister advised, we have had the benefit of a presentation and we are very happy with the result. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Assistant Minister, how do you wish to propose the regulations in second reading?
So there are quite a lot of regulations, but they only achieve what I set out in when I proposed the principle. So with members' indulgence, I'd like to propose them en bloc. I'm obviously happy to take questions about any particular regulation, but if members are happy to take them en bloc, I'm happy to propose it in that format.
Yes, and you don't wish to speak to them, you just propose them en bloc.
Please, sir, yeah.
Very well. Are the regulations seconded?
If I may, sir, thank you.
And does any member wish to speak on any of the regulations? Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, sir, I'm more than happy to support all the regulations in their entirety, sir. To find out it's I'm a governor of the Jersey Blind Society, ICANN, and I fully support this and congratulate the whole team on the work they've done. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the regulations? If no other member wishes to speak in second reading, then I close the debate and call upon the Assistant Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd firstly like to thank Deputy Lewis for his expressions of support, which is greatly appreciated. And I'd also like to thank the chair of the scrutiny panel for their input, which to some extent has resulted in this further proposal coming to the Assembly. And they have been supportive and helpful all the way through. Thank you, sir. And I propose the regulations.
Well, I ask the greffier to put a voting link into the chat. And I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted, 39 votes for, no votes contra, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote noted for in the chat. Do you propose the matter in third reading, Mr. Assistant Minister?
Yes, I do. And I'd like to thank members for their support so far on this important bit of legislation, which will mean a lot to people with disabilities and their ability to access entertainment and cultural matters. And I propose in the third reading, sir.
Very much. Are the regulations seconded for third reading?
If I may say, thank you.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? No member wishes to speak in third reading. And the debate is closed, and I ask the greffier to place a voting link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The regulations have been adopted in third reading, 38 votes for, no votes contra, no abstention in the link, and a further 1 vote for noted in the chat. Well, the next item is the draft constitution of the States and Public Elections Law, P17, lodged by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. Purpose of the debate, the main respondents will be the chair of the Corporate Service Scrutiny Panel, Senator Moore, and the Chief Minister, and Senator Gorst, and the chair of PPC in relation to the amendments of Senators Gorst and Farnham. Before I ask the greffier to read out the citation, members have had the benefit of a running order prepared by the Gref and approved by me, and a further update of that has been circulated, containing in the notes section those parts of the propositions and amendments where a qualified majority is required. In other words, 25 votes are needed. The purpose for that is, of course, that anything that changes the constitution of the Assembly, the duration of anyone's term of office, those kinds of things, pursuant to Article 89A, require the majority of elected members to pass it, and so those will have 25 votes. Hopefully, members have received the updated running order with those in the notes set out in full. Very well. I ask the greffier to read.
So, could I declare an interest, sir, which is the same for every state's member? It may seem obvious, but if we extend our term of office, we will get an extra month's salary, sir. And that can't stop us debating it, and I'm sure that wouldn't be a reason for people voting for an extension, but it's nonetheless the case, sir, and I think it should be mentioned.
Well, thank you for mentioning it, Conitard. It is, I suppose, arguably a direct interest, but it's an interest shared by everybody within the Assembly. And it makes, to my mind, no difference. It clearly has to be debated, and it doesn't disqualify anyone from voting in connection with this. Thank you very much indeed, though. Very well. Ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Constitution of the States and Public Elections Jersey Law 2000. A law to amend the Constitution of the States and make provision about the election of deputies and connétables and for connected purposes. The States, subject to the sanction of Her Most Excellent Majesty in Council, have adopted the following law.
Deputy Elves.
Thank you, sir. The Assembly stands on the threshold today of delivering some long overdue change to our electoral system. It is change demanded of us by the people we serve. Every time we ask them, their message is clear. It is change recommended to us time and time again by every review panel, commission and observer's mission we have invited to evaluate our system. Despite this, it is change that for over 20 years has been put off, impeded, blocked or wrecked by successive assemblies to the disappointment and despair of the public we serve. Our figures for civic engagement amongst the worst in the world is a manifestation and reflection of this. In December last year came a breakthrough, the strongest vote in support of real electoral change the Assembly has seen in decades. It is now within our grasp to demonstrate that we are listening. We can put the voter first by offering a fairer, simpler system, and we will repair the damage done to this Assembly's relationship with its people when the referendum vote was ignored. Today, what I am proposing is a legislation to enact that decision. Today, we can cement into law paragraph A of P139, an Assembly of 49 members, 37 elected from 9 districts, each choosing a number of representatives based on population, plus the 12 parish connotables. The remaining amendments to the legislation, which underpins the election process, addressing all of the proposed improvements, including the none of the above option, are currently being drafted and will return to the Assembly very soon. The change to the composition of the Assembly and the electoral districts represents a significant shift. International standards and best practice dictate such change should be implemented no later than 12 months before the date of the next election, which we can comfortably do at this sitting. The reason for this standalone first tranche of enactment is to give clarity and certainty 1 year ahead of election time. PPC is poised to launch a campaign informing the electorate of what the changes mean to them and how the new system will work. We want to reach out to potential candidates well before the election to let them know what is involved so they are prepared as soon as possible. We want to urge all those who have given up on us after the 2013 referendum to come back into the fold. We want to explain the new simplicity to those who found the old system confusing and off-putting. And near the time, we want to encourage everyone to do their duty and vote. No one likes to feel stupid, whether trying to select the right cycle on a washing machine or the right candidate in an election. Simplicity is key. It is not clever to be complex. I wish to pay tribute to the law drafters and law officers who have been incredibly helpful. We are in new territory here. It's tricky and exhaustive work being undertaken with great care and diligence. I've just noticed somebody just commented there's quite a bad echo.
There is a bad echo. Speaking personally, I can hear you, Deputy, so I haven't interrupted you. But if anyone's indicating that they can't hear, could they, notwithstanding the echo, could they indicate to me now? Well, it looks like even though there's something of an echo, and there is, you can still be heard. So if you'd like to continue.
I might just step back a little bit from the mic. Can you still hear me now?
Yes, we can. Or I can. Anyway.
Okay. Where was I? Sorry. I'll just repeat that last paragraph. I wish to pay tribute to the law drafters and law officers who have been incredibly helpful. We are in new territory here. It's tricky and exhaustive work being undertaken with great care and diligence. We offer our heartfelt thanks to them. From them, we learned that in moving from the old electoral system to the new, there has to be a day upon which one ceases to exist and the other becomes law. The best day for that transition is election day, hence the date appearing in this legislation. I'm just going to try something else at 1 second.
Yes. And if everyone, as Deputy Abbey has suggested in the chat, if everyone could make sure that their own microphones are muted to ensure that we don't have any unnecessary reverberation and echo.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Right.
I can still hear the echo a little bit as well. Okay. Yes, so from them we learnt that in moving from the old electoral system to the new, there has to be a day upon which one ceases to exist and the other becomes law. The best day for that transition is election day, hence the date appearing in this legislation. I must admit this came as a late surprise. We had hoped to continue our consultations on the date of the next election before bringing a proposal to the Assembly. However, it had to be part of this proposal, and with the lodging deadline fast approaching to ensure a debate this week, this curtailed that process. I had hoped for a meeting with the Scrutiny Liaison Committee and a Teams briefing for all members, but this did not happen. Deputy Labby and I would like to apologise to Senator Moore, the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, and to members for this. No slight was intended. The CLC comments are very much noted, and out of respect for them, PPC adopts a neutral stance in proposing the reduced lodging period amendment. There is precedent for a reduction in the lodging period for the government plan, and PPC's amendment to this effect was meant to be helpful. Members are, of course, entitled to reject that and to opt for a June election. The next Council of Ministers will have to adapt and overcome accordingly. It is unusual to have a debate in the Assembly on the date of the election. Historically, the GREF have worked out the most suitable day, passed this on, and with no questions asked. So I want to make it absolutely clear. PPC will make the election work on whichever day the Assembly chooses. I also want to make it clear that a June the 22nd election date does not extend the life of this parliamentary term. We were all elected or re-elected on May the 16th, 2018 for a 4-year term of office. The nearest Wednesday to that date in 2022 is Wednesday the 18th of May. That is the date we have scheduled for nomination night, the firing pistol for the election campaign. The parliamentary term ends there and the election begins. And because of the Assembly's unanimous approval of Article F of P88 2018 on the 26th of June 2018, the Assembly will properly prorogue or enter a period of dormancy. There will be a new distinction that when the election is called, our term of office is over. Ministers will only retain their authority to sign off on routine or emergency orders. If ministers are struggling with this concept, then I'm afraid that's tough. The Assembly was resolute in the aftermath of the last election when debating P88. Clinging to visible power during an election is not acceptable. Gone will be the days of ministerial decisions announcing new policies, grabbing JEP headlines whilst the campaign is in train. In practice and perception, the term of office will cease when an election begins, and an election begins on nomination night. PPC also does not consider it to be appropriate for outgoing members to maintain their ministerial positions after election day. Again, with P88 very much in mind, we propose that ministers cease to hold office after election day. The Chief Minister will remain in post to cover any emergencies until the swearing in of a new council. We are tightening up as far as possible the time between the election result and the election of Chief Minister and ministers, while allowing for necessary negotiation time. This can be done in 15 working days. In the second tranche of legislative amendments, which are due to come forward for debate before the summer recess, PPC will be bringing forward changes so that newly elected members take their oath as soon as practicable after the election, to ensure that members leaving the Assembly do not retain powers once the electorate have chosen others to take their place. The next election could also avoid Liberation Day and the Easter holidays, with a nomination on Wednesday, May the 18th. 5 clear weeks of election will take us to June the 22nd, 2022, which has a nice ring to it. And we can have Chief Minister, ministers and scrutiny chairs in place by the 3rd week of July, when we traditionally recess. As with electoral reform, the date of an election will be subject to 49 different views on the best choice. But just as with electoral reform, to make progress, there must be compromise. What should not be compromised is the optimum day for an election which best suits the public, not one that is personal preference of politicians or because of parliamentary procedure. This is definitely the tail wagging the dog. Soon after the last election, Deputy Labby, unhappy with attending Liberation Day as both a States member and a candidate for election, reopened the debate on the best time to hold our general election. Inevitably, the notion of returning to autumn resurfaced. In reality, this would mean a mid-October election at the earliest. The overwhelming consensus from members was a preference for spring or early summer when the evenings are lighter, coupled with a desire for Liberation Day not to fall within the election period. It was me who suggested the date of June 22nd. The last election clashed with my own students' crucial GCSEs and A-level exams. This struck me at the time as counterproductive in terms of increasing turnout amongst the younger demographic, especially since the Assembly lowered the voting age to 16, which is something we should be proud of, especially as very few jurisdictions around the world have been brave enough to do this. If we want to empower our young people to vote, we also have a duty to make it as accessible as possible for them. On the issue of Liberation Day, former bailiff Sir William Balash sums up the dilemma in the 2018 States Assembly annual report, and I quote, "As the chairman of PPC says, sitting members who are standing for re-election have a slightly uncomfortable day on Liberation Day, which is a time when all States members should be on parade to celebrate our national day. The concern here is for new candidates. How must they feel days before polling day, seeing those they are challenging in the prominent public gaze on our national day?" The committee, the CONITAB, were consulted once a June date was being considered, and because of a clash with parish accounting and future budgeting, the CONITABs voiced their preference for an autumn election. The committee did, however, give its blessing for the 2022 election to be held in June, but stated they would like a conversation as soon as possible on a return to autumn for the 2026 election. This is a conversation PPC will facilitate. The Deputy Greffier, Deputy Labbe and myself attended the Council of Ministers. The June date was well received and gained implicit approval. Concerns over preparation for the government plan and a so-called extension of the term of office were not voiced then and appeared many weeks later. If the election were to return to the autumn in 2026, as a number of members seem to prefer again, government arrangements for the preparation of their common strategic plan would have to find ways to overcome this. The point is we can overcome, and we always do. I want to finish my speech with this observation. An election date is of fundamental importance to our democracy. PPC is striving to hold the next election at the optimum time for the greatest voter turnout. We are not playing politics. We believe this consideration trumps any other. Nevertheless, the Assembly has the opportunity to reject that and stick to the May date. Either way, we will respect the Assembly's decision. Changes to our electoral system enacted here, again, are driven by what is best, simplest and most fair from the voter's perspective, not the politician's perspective. That has been our guiding principle. The December debate still rings in our ears, with 5 amendments attempting to alter PPC's proposed changes to the Assembly. It ran into 3 days. In truth, by the time we reached Senator Farnham's and Gorst's amendments, both attempting to restore the senators, we all knew the Assembly had made up its mind. Nevertheless, we listened to the senators and their supporters. All were given the opportunity to have their say, and they did so repeatedly. Do we really need to re-rehearse those arguments today? This Assembly resolved to make real change, to mend our broken system, to repair the damage done when a referendum was ignored, to build a better, more meaningful, fairer and simpler future for democracy in Jersey. We want to restore confidence in this Assembly. So members, for just one more debate on electoral reform before we close this chapter, I urge you to maintain your resolve and stand by the decision you made just 4 months ago. Let's move forward. I propose the principles.
Thank you very much. Deputy, are the principles seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak on the principles. Senator Farmer.
Thank you, sir. It's difficult for a number of members, I think. Well, it's difficult for me because there are some elements of the principles I support and some that I wholeheartedly can't support. But I think what is all clear is that we are all committed to the continued change that we've seen over the last 20 years. In fact, since Clothier, there has been the changes, or elements of the change have been introduced in stages. So a lot of what I want to say in relation to the island-wide mandate, I will keep, I think, sir, for the debate on the amendments. But I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that the chair of PPC made in a very good presentation of the principles, sir. And the first one is that I think islanders do want continued change, but I'm concerned about the fact that we're proposing to remove the island-wide mandate clearly against public opinion if members cast their minds back to the parish roadshows that were carried out, we'll call them roadshows, by the chair and a team from PPC. And I attended a number of those, but I remember the one I particularly attended in St. Juan was wholeheartedly against the removal of the island-wide mandate by a very large majority, as I believe all, perhaps with the exception of St. Helier, I'm not sure, I can't remember, were not in favour of removing the island-wide mandate. I don't think where the chair also talked about wrecking, there's certainly no intention to try and wreck anything. A healthy difference of view and opinion is nothing to be concerned about. It's why we have these debates. And I also want to just touch on the issue of the claim that our current system is confusing. And I don't think that's right. I think it's underestimating our electorate to say that they don't understand the current system. I mean, all of my life, and I've been interested in politics since I can remember, since a very young age, because my family were always voted and we were always encouraged to take an interest. I've never witnessed any of my peers or friends or family or other islanders saying the system confuses them. I believe we have made it a little bit easier moving forward with the single true election day, although that I think unwittingly started to cause the demise of the office of senator, because the Assembly at the time felt it wasn't possible to elect more than 6 or 8 senators on a single ballot paper. Well, of course, Guernsey have since proved us wrong. So to make progress, we must all compromise, as Deputy Elves said, and I think the amendments, or some of the amendments proposed today, are exactly that, a compromise, sir, and I look forward to speaking to them. And whatever happens today, sir, whatever the results, I hope the whole Assembly will embrace the way forward, whatever that may be. Thank you.
Very much, Senator. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I just wish to make a reference or comment on the reference the chair PPC made to the necessity of this further debate. In this context, I refer back to the so-called hospital debate some months ago, when there was disappointment amongst the public that it was so short. It is the case, obviously, that members had the benefit of internal debates on the matter, and I see why the public were disappointed that it was not aired more fully at that time. I appreciate too that this subject has been debated to death over the last few years, and members can be forgiven for saying why this is not it is not too similar in the sense that the public should be well aware of it. But I respect and suggest that therein lies the problem, that the matter has been debated so often and the status quo has been retained so often that on the last occasion, many of my constituents certainly believe that it would meet the same fate and were not particularly incentivized to join in. Now that they are facing the reality of the situation, there appears to have been greater interest by the public in what is now before us. And I therefore do reject the idea that this is some form of wrecking motion. And I would ask that whatever point of view members have, that we do continue with this in the spirit that the public deserve a further full debate, no matter that there are a few items that will not have been rehearsed before. So I urge members to continue with this debate in that vein. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. And I too would like to. Oh, I do apologise. Sorry, wrong button. I too will maintain the majority of my comment to speak on the amendments, but I did wish to respond to comments by the chair of PPC in relation to conversations about this matter. It was, whilst I'm grateful, and members of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee and the various panels, I'm sure, will also be grateful for the apologies of the Privileges and Procedures Committee in relation to the moving of the election date. It is rather disappointing to note that the Council of Ministers were indeed consulted on this important matter. This is not a petty matter. It is actually of fundamental importance, and I think Senator Gorst in his amendment identifies that issue very clearly about the moving of a date of an election and the fundamental message that that can hold for both the community and members and also those wishing to stand for a future election. It was well known to the Privileges and Procedures Committee after the previous election that actually the move from October to the spring did cause issues in terms of preparing for the government plan and preparing also for the common strategic priorities process and all of the implications that has, both for the executive and for the non-executive members. And so it is simply for that purpose that we feel somewhat disappointed by the approach of the Privileges and Procedures Committee in terms of not taking into regard the impact that this move will have, both on the fundamental principle, but secondly, on the good functioning of the Assembly and its internal work. We, as the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, have on a number of occasions had to highlight the difficulties that we have in conducting important business over the summer period, where it is very difficult to achieve hearings with both civil servants and ministers who wish to take a period of holiday. And it was somewhat amusing to hear the chair mention that the Council of Ministers, etc., all appointments will be made by the 3rd of June, just in time for the summer recess. I really would hope and counsel the Privileges and Procedures Committee to give greater consideration. And there had been a rumour some time ago that they had considered bringing the election date forward to an October election again, as the chair mentioned in her speech. And I was somewhat disappointed that they didn't take that step and do that. So I simply wish to note the Scrutiny Liaison Committee's majority view in this regard, and to thank the Chair for the apology. But I would like to state at this time that greater consideration does need to be given to that particular matter. And I hope that going forward we can have greater engagement between the Privileges and Procedures Committee and Scrutiny Liaison when considering the organisation of important business in the future, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I first of all put down to speak because I wanted to congratulate the chairman on PPC, who I thought was a very masterly speech, very, very clearly setting out the whole rationale as to why we really have come to this point. We must see it through. And of course, I think the overall position is that I think that what we have here today is as closest as we can to the referendum decision, the referendum that was taken, I think 2012 or whenever it was. And of course, I was a member of the States, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I regret voting against those changes that time. I think everything that's gone on since then indicates that was the wrong decision, that we need to make progress, and this proposal we have on the table finally achieves that within 1 year of our election. I think that absolutely mustn't be underestimated. I think that there are, for example, I think the issues that the chairman spoke of, in particular, I think the issue about the rush, and we had that debate before, I won't go into the details of it, but I think the way the transition was done in between the Council of Ministers that held office between 2014 and 2018 and now was not good. We had absolutely embarrassment after embarrassment of ministerial decisions. I can't remember what it was, the whole, which really set the whole structure of our government, ministerial government and so on, that was rushed through, and things were, you know, we're only really now seeing the full consequences of this, all within that period of PERDA. And so I'm really pleased that the arrangements we have here will absolutely rule that out. And of course, it's well known. I don't intend to stand, not at my age again, and I can say I'm absolutely delighted that on the election day I will not hold any ministerial responsibility, but I will deliver it up until then as my obligation to my electorate requires. But I can assure you that there's no personal interest. But I do feel that Liberation Day was spoiled by having that election right around the middle of the Liberation Day. I remember feeling all those things that the chairman described, and how the public must be very confused. And so I think we should allow ourselves to celebrate and mark the Liberation Day in without all that tension and political goings on. And we, you know, then after that, then we are then into a proper democratic process. I think the complications that have been mentioned about the common strategic plan and the government plan and so on, I think all those are sortable. You start with the democratic processes, and then we modify those what are bureaucratic processes to suit. So, as the chairman said, it's sortable. So we should not see that as a bar. So ultimately, I think there is merit in the longer run in an autumn election, but I think that will come in time. One thing I'd like the chairman to, in her reply, to pick up, please, is this issue. I had hoped that we would also see in time for the next elections changes to the election law. And the particular thing I wanted to see happen, I've always thought it was very unsatisfactory, that, as it is now, that we do have a common system for access to register of electors, and that we do have a single nomination timetable. and we don't have this situation where particular members can manipulate or candidates can manipulate which constituency they stand for by turning up on different dates and surprise everybody and so on. I'd like to know, I think I recall we had a debate about that, and I'd like to know where that sits in the scheme of things. Is that now too late to come because of the fact that it's within a year as an election, and therefore is that for the future? I would like, please, if the chairman please could pick that up. But I'm absolutely delighted with and it's where we are. We've got the opportunity to understand. I think there are some issues on the, for me, there is really only one issue for me on the amendment, and that is the question whether we've got enough members, because limited the restrictions to reduce the number of members, I think, has given problems in trying to achieve. That's an issue for the amendment when we come to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Move the mask. I just want to say, it's following on from Senator Moore's comments, that I mean, I feel for the new chair of PPC, because I think she's been given a difficult task with regard to the decision we made 4 months ago. But to hear that scrutiny haven't been consulted, for me, is a massive problem, particularly with regard to the date. To be honest, there are elements when you look at the way this has gone through, and strangely, this is not me speaking against. It's just I'm criticising. Is that PPC have not covered themselves in glory on this. They are a body that is meant to maintain a kind of equilibrium with the assembly itself, but we see that they've not consulted scrutiny. We know that when this was passed in the end of last year, that it was opportunistic in itself. I can handle that opportunism if the process afterwards is spotless and flawless, but we hear today that it's not, and I personally don't think apologies are enough. I think, you know, I've spent a lot of time in this assembly criticising the government for ignoring scrutiny. I now have to criticise PPC for ignoring scrutiny, and that saddens me enormously. And certainly with regards to the date, it makes me strongly question what, you know, whether I could support that, and I would ask that actually, when it comes to it, that part is taken separately. In terms of the date itself, I just don't see how an election on the 22nd of June works with the calendar, because I remember, so I'll cast my mind back to 2018. We had the election on the 18th of May or 16th of May, thereabouts. And we were sworn in at the very beginning of June. We then had a process which lasted about 3 to 4 weeks of electing the Council of Ministers. And then from a scrutiny perspective, there's lots of new members, very eager, as all new members are, wanted to get down to work. And what happened? Well, the government went on holiday. And that was with an election date in May. With an election date in June, the end of June, towards the end of June, we will have the Council of Ministers elected towards the end of July. And then I promise you, the government will then go on holiday. And there will be no discussion of the Common Strategic Policy. There will be no discussion of the government plan until September. And there will be lots of new members kicking their heels and wondering, why did we stand for election again? Because nothing actually seems to happen, because everyone's gone on holiday. And so for me, this 22nd of June is an entirely unworkable issue. And so it's not against the principles, it's against that particular element of these principles. It does not work. And, you know, you'll have the media standing there saying, oh, we've got a new government. Oh, where have they gone? They're in the Costa del Sol or somewhere else. And so I urge members to really think hard about that, because in my view, it is entirely unworkable. And that's the reality of the situation. We can theorize and we can say, well, does everyone have to go on holiday? No, of course they don't, but they will. That's just the reality of the situation. And so I just want to register my disappointment with the PPC, and they're not taking this to scrutiny. As good as their reasons for that may be, it's not good enough. And you know, especially on the back of a level of opportunism that was there in November, December. But certainly, sir, for me, that date just does not and cannot work. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Labby.
Oh, thank you, sir. And I wasn't going to speak in this part of the debate, but I do to repeat the apology to Senator Moore that the chairman of PPC gave on both of our behalfs in her speech.
I'm sorry, Deputy. Someone appears to be making a strange noise. I don't think it was you. It's gone quiet now, so perhaps you could continue. Thank you.
And yes, I have to accept also the criticism from Deputy Morrell and apologise. It wasn't. We didn't set out to.
I'm sorry, if I could ask you to pause again. I'm not sure what the difficulty is. Could everyone please be absolutely clear that they have turned off their microphones? People could check that once again. There seems to be, after you've been speaking for a while, a strange background interference, Deputy. Right, let's try that one again. Thank you very much. It may be coming from the States Assembly speakers, so Deputy Alves is suggesting. Let's try that. If you try to continue, I'm sorry to have interrupted you.
And to Deputy Morrell, I said, well, we will be having a debate on the date because of the Senator Gorst's amendments. So we will be able to debate the whys and wherefores of the change. But I thought at this stage, I would point out that what we took into consideration when proposing a change to the date, we have to look to Article 3 of the first protocol to the ECHR, given effect by the Human Rights Jersey Law 2000, which states that the high contracting parties hold free elections at reasonable intervals with secret ballot under condition which will ensure the free expression of the opinion of people in the choice of legislature. And we also take into consideration the Venice Commission's Code of Good Practice in Electoral Matters, June 2002, which says, with regard to frequency of elections, that elections must be held at regular intervals at Legislative Assembly's office, must not exceed 5 years. So we are well within the 5 years. And it was the view of the law officers. We are entitled to change the date of the election by regulation. We can't do that. At the moment, it has to be within 7 days of May the 16th, because that was the date of the last election. So there's a 7-day leeway. If we want to keep it on a Wednesday, we move to May the 18th, 2022. I did talk to the law officers about an autumn date, and Senator Moore is absolutely right. It would have to be mid-October, really, once recess is finished, when people are back off their holidays, and then the nomination process can start in early September. And if you want a 4 or 5 week election, it probably would be mid-October. Now, I did float this with members. We had a lot of discussions. I think we talked about it on a Teams meeting in 2018 to 2019, and the overwhelming opinion was that most people preferred the lighter evenings that a spring or early summer election we benefit from, rather than an October election where the evenings are getting darker earlier. That's a very important consideration for a lot of members, and of course, I had to have a discussion with law officers as to whether a move to October for 2022 was reasonable. And with the amount of months, there was a question as to whether it was reasonable to extend the term from May to October. and we decided it wasn't, and that any discussion for an autumn election would have to be taken before, now. By the time we set the date for the next elections, and that's what we will do. We'll have that conversation because I'm very happy to give that assurance that we will do that and properly consult this time with everybody on that for 2026. But it was the view of the law officers. We didn't get sworn in until June the 1st. We first sat on June the 4th. And it was the view of the law officers that it was perfectly reasonable, and the law allows human rights legislation for us to move the election date to June the 22nd. And the guiding, the catalyst for this was sitting, being on parade on Liberation Day, not wanting to be too visible because of being a candidate in election, the sense that we were there in the public gaze and the gaze of the media, and in the middle of a campaign. And I found it cringeworthy, and I just thought to myself, as I was walking into the square for the Liberation Day ceremony, that how it must, I wondered how it must feel for candidates challenging me to see me there on parade in such a way on Liberation Day. And it's a shame, because you want to be able to enjoy Liberation Day. It's our national day. And so that was a prime catalyst for opening the debate on changing the election. And also, of course, a May election, generally, that you will have the Easter holidays in the middle of the election campaign, and that's not wise. And of course, as the chairman of BBC mentioned, the fact that it's not great for people taking exams. So I hope that is helpful. No doubt we will talk about this more and specifically when Senator Gorst's amendment to the election day comes along. Thank you, sir.
We can't hear anything, sir, and nor can Deputy Alves.
Thanks. Where is that?
We can hear you now, sir.
Ah, marvellous. Something was muted that probably shouldn't have been. Thank you very much. Constable St Helier.
Thank you, sir. After a very good opening speech by the chair of PPC, setting out the grounds of this historic debate, or historic moment in the state's evolution, it's been disappointing that a sideshow has been set up outside the main event. And several members have been criticising the PPC on which I sit in terms of consultation, or a lack of it, with scrutiny over the impact of the different election dates. I think it's a sideshow, sir, because this is an historic opportunity for the states to stop being what is essentially, and I've said this in the past without being challenged, a gerrymandered parliament. And we have a chance to stop that being the case today. So to hear members criticising PPC, accusing PPC of opportunism, is really quite extraordinary. PPC, and I've been a chair myself, and I know that the current chair has a thick skin, has struggled through the years to try to end the fact that some people have more power over government in Jersey than others, and it depends entirely on where they live. And that is so wrong. It is quite extraordinary it's still happening in a Western democracy in the 21st century. But instead, the first few members to have spoken have by and large criticised PPC around the detail of the proposed election day. And let's be clear, the chair said very clearly, PPC will work with whatever date is set for the election. So that let's not spend a lot of time on this matter, because PPC will work with whatever is chosen. The reason the committee has come up with the preferred date was explained very well, not only by Deputy Alves, but by Deputy Young. And Deputy Young in particular, I think, drew our attention to the fact that Liberation Day is the national day of the island. And post-pandemic, having effectively been denied the opportunity to commemorate and celebrate Liberation Day for 2 consecutive years, the island will really want to commemorate it next year. And I think the last thing they will want, and the last thing members will want, is for questions about self-interest and promotion ahead of a impending election, an election which is effectively already running, will spoil that day. And we don't want that. We don't want politics in Liberation Day next year. And that's why the proposed date has been chosen. It gives us sufficient distance away. And of course, as again, the chair of PPC explained, the expiry of the current term of office will neatly segue into a nomination meeting. And that will be sufficiently far away from Liberation to allow people to concentrate on the new election. So I think the debate needs to focus on the principles that we're here to debate. We're here to make our Parliament work in a way that is fair to every elector of the island, no matter where they live. And I'm concerned, I wouldn't perhaps go far as calling them wrecking motions, but as I say, there does seem to be some diversionary tactics being employed at the start of this debate. Those side issues, if you like, are going to be the subject of amendments. Let's deal with them then. But let's use our opening speeches to mark the fact that we are really trying to make sure that every person in Jersey has the same power at the ballot box as their neighbours. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Conrad. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I absolutely agree with everything my constable has just said, Constable Crowcroft. I did want to speak because, as I say, I think a lot has been said, and I agree with some of the speakers, but not all. But I think the principle of the principles is fantastic. It was delivered exceptionally well and really good explanation by Deputy Alves. I do have a question. I don't need the deputy answer it, but I'm going to be asking her a more detailed question when we come to the nomination process. So I give her a warning there. That article I want clarified because of all the hoo-ha went on last time, and it was absolutely a good recommendation from the election observers. So I like to give people warnings, sir, if I'm going to ask them maybe something they haven't covered in their original speech. So I put that there. I just don't really want to get in a political argument with Deputy Morell, but the pandemic did one thing, sir. You can be sure nobody will ever be on holiday again, and we have teams. I understand we can't sit in the Assembly from the Costa del anywhere, but we can do every other meeting, and we do. And I think actually for newer members, a little bit longer of, they've all said it to me. It was sort of rabbit in the headlights, sir. I need a bit more information. Some people who have watched politics for years, not so surprised. And you would hope that someone standing for the Assembly actually knows what goes on. They've listened to debates like I did. I've actually met members who were elected and never listened to a state sitting in their life. But then again, you know, we are where we are. I think today, I've told the chair of PPC I'm supporting everything she's put forward. I'm not supporting any amendments, and I absolutely agree with my constable. This is where we should be going. We had the big debate last year. I probably shouldn't have spoken, but I just get annoyed when people put it out there that we have 10 weeks holiday. Really? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Chief Minister.
Yes, just briefly, sir, and I may reserve other comments for other debates. But again, I think also to pick up on the comments from the last two speakers, I was slightly, I suppose, disappointed was the expression, the comment that someone was disappointed the council minister was consulted on the date. We have had some discussions. We do need to have some more discussions with PPC, some of the mechanics going forward, but we were asked in relation to the issue of the government plan. And I think the only comment I would make is that whatever the date will be next time round, whether it was May or June, there will be difficulties because it will be the first time that a government plan will have to be produced by the end of that year. Because if members recall, in 2018, actually, take the principle please, on the detail, the previous medium-term financial plan extended into and to the end of 2019. We had to have transitional arrangements, etc. So to an extent, our hands were relatively tied. And the view we took as council ministers, we made some observations around the mechanics, which PPC have taken on board. The date will be the date, but we also felt it wasn't appropriate. We didn't really feel appropriate to challenge the date. And actually, sir, I think from memory, the majority of the council ministers supported the date that PPC are proposing because of the issues that have been eloquently laid out, both by the chair of PPC, by Deputy Russell Labby and others, including the Constable St Helier, and for example, the conflicts with Liberation Day. Next year will be the 77th anniversary and is likely to be the first time that we will have been able to celebrate Liberation Day for the past 2 years. So there will be events, I expect, and so I would have thought it was therefore appropriate for members to be able to fully participate in them without fear of being seen to be electioneering. And I think from that perspective, Deputy Russell Labby and the Chair and PPC have thought about it appropriately, and that will certainly I will be supporting the date that they have proposed. It is not without its difficulties, neither of the dates are without their difficulties, and it is with the same, and it will be with a different set of challenges to those that we experienced in 2018. Yes, government work does carry on at various points, including during the August period. That is all I'm going to say on that matter. But we'll have other debates around amendments, and we'll see how those pan out. But in terms of the dates, I think PPC had to consider it appropriately, and I think that is, and certainly I'll be supporting those.
Very much, Minister. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. On this issue of the election date, I think that those who've spoken in favour of moving it, Deputy Alves and the Constable St Helier in particular, have made an extremely good case. But likewise, I think that Senator Moore and Deputy Morell have raised some absolutely valid concerns that are worth discussing. But there is, of course, going to be an amendment on that very issue, and that really ought to be the place for the substantive debate on that. And I certainly pledge to respect whatever decision the Assembly makes at the end of that. What this part of the debate is on the principles, and so I wanted to try to bring it back to the bigger picture here. Partly, I guess, because I've spoken to just a handful of members of the public who were a little bit surprised this was coming back again after December, because they don't necessarily understand how the parliamentary workings go on for these sorts of things. And so we're in a position where we're redebating something that we debated just a short while ago, as well as a couple of amendments which go completely against the decision that we made by a substantial majority. So I'm hoping that this part of the debate at least can be about rubber stamping that decision we made in December. And in the run-up to this debate, I tried to remember what happened in that debate in December and how we arrived at such a conclusive result, how the momentum took us there, but most importantly, that sense of pure euphoria I felt at the end of that debate, and which I hope other members felt too, and can perhaps draw upon for the remainder of this debate. I think euphoria is the right way to feel, because that debate, and hopefully this one too, comes after 20 years of undignified wrangling, of election after election of poor voter turnout, a clear growing dissatisfaction amongst the public in our democratic process, and even the rejection of a referendum result. But finally, we came together to take our democracy forward on terms that in December, almost a supermajority of this assembly felt able to get behind. And what a feeling that inspired in me, and hopefully others as well. Progress that we ought to be proud of, and a real sense of excitement I hope we can feel for the future about a reinvigorated system and what that could deliver for our democracy. And the reason we were able to do that was because those of us with a genuine desire for change, even when we didn't completely agree with each other on what the perfect solution would be, were willing to listen to what the other side had to say, to try to work together to focus on what we could unite around, rather than digging our heels in the sand and holding entrenched positions, which ultimately would leave nobody happy at the end of it. And I remember how I felt at the end of that, and hope that we can feel it again at the end of this day and be able to say that we resolved this issue, that we provided the foundations for a better election next time round, which will engage more people and end 20 years of deadlock, which will hopefully in the future turn this into a non-issue where, because the fundamental issue of unfairness has been resolved, it no longer needs to constantly be raised, and instead we can focus on the business of governing the island, tackling the big issues that people care about, which I believe will restore a lot of faith in politics. And let's not forget how much time and resources, of course, that would save as well. But of course, there were some members who didn't share in that euphoria, who voted against it last time. And I get it. I've seen versions of electoral reform presented in the past which have made me uncomfortable and may well have put me in the against change block. But I say to those members who are against in December, don't be afraid of change. This change is a huge opportunity, and it will be better to get on board to help positively determine where we move together, rather than being an obstacle and end up risking being sidelined. And I went back and looked at the Hansard from December to remind myself of what those principal objections were. And one which I think ought to be treated most seriously is the charge that this proposal would somehow damage the parish system. And I think it's sad that some have that impression of this proposal, because I think nothing could be further from the truth. I think this proposal is specifically put together to take into account those concerns that were expressed first time round about the parish link, and try to match those people up with those who are concerned about the unfairness in our current system, and show that the two principles don't have to be opposed to one another. And I was really pleased in that last debate that several constables understood this and spoke very powerfully in support, and outlined what they thought needed to be done on top of this to help take our parish system forward. And I think it feels like there are a newer generation of constables who have got the will to make this happen, and don't want the current electoral system to be responsible for maintaining unfairness in our voting system and holding back progress, all in the name of essentially retaining 7 out of 12 parishes having a sole parish deputy, and a senatorial election process to distract from that deputy being held to account on island-wide issues, which they should be, and which issue is resolved by this legislation. So that the parish system will not just survive, but it will thrive as long as there are people in the system who are willing to make that happen, people who understand that it has to look to the future, be prepared to move with the times, and be open to respond to the issues which matter to their parishioners. And that system will always be relevant so long as they do that. So I ask members in this debate to accept the principles that we accepted by an almost supermajority in December, to get behind this, to make it work, to, I hope, offer the public the opportunity to take part in an election, whatever day it ends up being on, and we'll get to that point, but to offer them to take part in an election where their vote will be worth an equal amount, where we will have, I hope, a robust discussion about the future of the islands, and the population of Jersey will get what it deserves in the outcome of that election. And we will, I hope, stop a further deadlock from occurring, which is what will happen if this proposition is rejected, or if the amendments from Senator Gorst and Senator Farnham are accepted, where we will simply end up going back to the drawing board. And we've been back to the drawing board countless times before with no guarantee that, oh, it's just the next attempt, that will finally be the one, when that clearly has never been the case before and would certainly not be guaranteed to be the case this time. Now is the time. We have an excellent proposition in front of us that takes us so much further forward in delivering voter equity, which is at really the heart of democracy, whilst also maintaining that parish link that is considered so important to many islanders, finding a unique Jersey balance there, not having us as an outlier amongst all of the other jurisdictions we often compare ourselves to in the international community, as being a jurisdiction that has a broken voting system, which is unfair and undemocratic. We'll be able to say, no, we have a fair system. It doesn't look like what any other jurisdiction has. It's not been imposed upon us by anything. We chose it ourselves based on our own tradition and history and a desire for a fairer electoral system. So, sir, I ask members to draw upon that sense of euphoria that many of us felt in December to endorse the principles of this legislation. We'll have a good debate, I'm sure, on the date of the election, and may the best side win in that debate. But let's move forward and enhance our democracy, and that is at the heart of what the principles of this legislation are all about. So I ask members to support the principles.
Thank you very much, Senator. Connie Tarbison-Prelide.
Thank you, sir. I do object to the comments of the PPC chair referring to previous propositions relating to electoral change. Most propositions are brought with good intent, and the chair must understand that in a democracy, all views must be considered and members vote thereon. We all have various networks in our societies and receive differing views on matters before the Assembly. All representations to me, sir, have been in favour of retaining senators, and I shall in turn be supporting the amendments to achieve this. We've had parish road shows in our parishes. They were not well supported, and sadly, PPC have chosen to ignore these. We've seen the move from autumn to spring election, sir. My observation is that it hasn't been as great a success as was anticipated, and that the election time needs a review with the benefit of our experience. I do, however, agree with the parameters proposed with regard to PERDA and a dormant period, so would support any proposal to achieve a result which will overcome this in a fair and equitable manner. I want to see more PPC efforts going into making it easier for people to vote. That, sir, is the area that is unnecessarily complicated in my view and needs bringing up to date using available technology. PPC, sir, I believe have got themselves totally entrenched in the principles of voting weight and power. I would contend, sir, that this is simply not an issue which affects our government in any way, and would ask that they may wish to demonstrate whether PPC actually have any evidence of any member of the public in Jersey having been affected. My experience is that one receives representations from residents throughout the island via emails, through the GREF, through telephone calls and correspondence, and one tries to respond or refer those to those who can give a better response. This would normally be a minister or governmental department. There is no particular linkage to an electoral district. Ministers, sir, represent the whole island. Scrutiny through its various panels represents the whole island, so I don't consider the repeated PPC argument to be valid in our situation. I believe that one should interpret the term international best practice according to the local situation. That was certainly my understanding when I attended a CPA conference on the subject, and I would urge PPC to take a broader view which is suitable for our situation in Jersey. I am so supportive of change for the good, but am yet to be convinced that B17 achieves this. I don't wish to repeat previous arguments at this point in the debate, but I think it important that I express my views on the principles, as I don't agree with them as presented and won't be supporting them unamended. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Connie Tarb. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to, first of all, start off by thanking Constable Crowcroft. We haven't always agreed on things over this term, but I think he was spot on in something he said in terms of he referred to them as sideshows. I wouldn't quite call them that in terms of the date of the election. And I think that is something that is separate and can be debated separately, and there will be, I think there will actually be a genuine debate on that in terms of its pros and cons, and I look forward to that debate. But so we're talking about the principles that we voted for in PE 139, and we have been here. And for many, this is a very surprising debate because as I was speaking to people in my constituency, the question was, well, why? I thought you'd already voted for that, and I had to explain the system. And so there are many who feel, particularly in St Helier and districts around St Helier, that they aren't represented equally in terms of their voting rights. And so this is a real step forward. And I think the positive feeling that came out of the vote from P139 at a time where we were in a very difficult situation with COVID and a very difficult situation for this assembly. I hope that members remember that and they look back at that and think, I'm not going to change my approach over the principles now. I'm not going to change my approach in the final vote and take a step backward with the amendments. And I'll actually stick to what was said before so that we don't have to yet again go back to the electorate and say, well, actually at the final hurdle, we failed again. So I urge members to support the principles and to support them as they voted for in P139 without the amendments in the future. And I look forward to the debate on the if you like, the minutiae and the detail of the electoral date. As PPC have said, they can accommodate whatever date we vote for, and so that is a separate issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak on the Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief. I'm just basically saying that I support the principles that are being put forward, and I support the changes that are being put forward by PPC. I may not speak in each of the individual debates because, in one sense, we are regurgitating things that I've heard over the last 13 years in this assembly, and I know there's entrenched views, and I hope that members will refrain from going over old ground as we have done. The comments that I will make, however, is that when I first came into the States over 13 years ago, former Deputy Roy Lahessery said to me two things which have stuck in my mind. He said, one, you'll be frustrated, and two, you'll have no real friends. And I can attest to the first. I've been frustrated with repeated States assemblies for the number of times we've debated these issues and heard the same arguments, and the same goes for other topics. Rather than actually grasping the nettle and doing things, we repeatedly go round in circles. Now, this particular debate, I thought last year at the end, we'd finally got somewhere. And I remember in that debate, I was actually opposed to the proposals that had been put forward by PPC at that time. And I was really digging my heels in. And I remember being told we were expected or being asked to make a compromise. And on that particular occasion, I did compromise. And I actually voted in the end to support something that I wasn't 100% sure of. Now I can see that, and I was really pleased, by the way, that we'd actually made progress. For the first time in 13 years, we'd made progress on this issue. And my feelings at the moment are one of despair, because we're going to go back again. And I think that part of my reasoning why we're going back on this again is some members, the senators in particular, have suddenly realised it's a totally different ball game for them, and that they're going to have to stand for election in districts, and then they've looked at who's in those districts and they think, oh, I may not be successful this time. In the same way, a number of deputies who've never faced election before are now thinking, in the bigger districts, I'm going to face opposition. Well, that's democracy. And I think by trying to sort of put the clock back and try and retain the existing system, all we are doing is retaining the existing faults in the states. And I can, when I say talk about despair, I wonder if we will ever be able to deal with the problems in this island where you have a states that can't make decisions and members are looking at their own electoral prospects rather than the interests of the island. And so, sir, I will stick to what I agreed last year when I compromised and went along with this new system. And I hope other members will also, in the spirit of the compromises we made and to try and make progress, will do so also. And with that, sir, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy, does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak on the principles? Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Alves to respond.
Thank you, sir, and I'd just like to thank all members for their contributions. A lot of the things that were brought up, I will address in more detail in the amendments. I did want to start off by thanking Deputy Labby, Constable Crowcroft, Deputy Martin, Senator Mezek and Deputy Ward, who addressed a lot of the points that have already been raised. I wanted to start off by, if I start off with Deputy Young and Deputy Martin, who mentioned nominations. The nominations process and detail will be coming in the second tranche of amendments, legislation that will bring forward. So, and there is still time to do that. So there will be discussions with the Assembly and with members prior to lodging these. So I hope that answers your queries. With regard to people mentioning that I had said that this was there was wrecking motions, I just want to make it clear that that wasn't my intention. I completely respect and agree that we do need to hear all views. However, I did just want to, it was just really to reiterate the point that we did debate this quite extensively in December. And I also wanted to address the statement that was made about this having been opportunist. This was something that was lodged with for 6 weeks. Okay, it was something that we'd also debated earlier on in the year with in 2020 with P126. So I think it's like Constable Crowcroft said, I think it's a little bit unfair actually to say that we were.
Afraid your screen is frozen. Deputy Alves, I don't know what's happened there, but let's hopefully this will now.
Amendments.
I'm afraid your screen froze. I'm afraid your screen froze for probably the last 15 seconds or so.
Oh, okay. What was the last thing I said, sir? Do you remember?
Well, you were talking about it. The allegation that that you'd made that there that it was an opportunist resolution
yes.
for Christmas, and what you wanted to say about that.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so this obviously this was lodged. The original proposition was lodged in October, so members did have 6 weeks to lodge amendments, and several amendments were lodged, and we then debated it for 3 days. It wasn't my intention to come across as if I was saying that what had happened to with the amendments for today's debate were wrecking motions. I just wanted to reiterate that a lot of the things that are in the amendments that we will debate today had already been covered during that debate. Okay, I just need to refer back to my notes. So a couple of members mentioned how obviously the parish roadshows, those parish roadshows were actually for the previous proposals which took the constables out. And this is why we listened to what was said in those roadshows and came back with the proposition that we debated in December. I also want to raise the point that I understand, I think it was Senator Farnham who mentioned that his family and friends have never been confused by our system, which I understand. However, they're not representative of the whole population. We did a massive body of work in PPC where we hired for insight, and the results from that, from the focus groups and the surveys that we did, was also included with our proposition in December. And also, all you have to do is look at our voter turnout, 34%. You know, I think it was Comres that said they completed some market research in 2019 as well. And they said that 60% of the population found it difficult to understand the system. So I think that just proves that actually it's not as easy as certain members might think. To clarify, there will be separate votes, obviously because of the articles. This is the principles that we are debating, so I do hope that members will be supportive of that, so that we can have the debate on the amendments. I also wanted to address the points that were made regarding there not being consultation with scrutiny, and I agree with Senator Moore. That you're right, there should have been greater consideration. I'm not sure if it was due to the echo. That I did state in my speech that we weren't actually expecting to bring the election day with this body of work that we're bringing forward today, but because of the advice that we then got, we had to bring it forward. So it was premature, and I do apologise again for that. Scrutiny. Okay. Sorry, sir, I'm just checking all my notes. Chief Minister is absolutely correct. The third amendment that PPC has brought forward in relation to dealing with the timings with the CSP and the government plan, these will have to be changed regardless of the election date. So there will be a vote separately on that as well. And whether the Assembly chooses to keep the election date in May, we will still have to have a debate on that amendment and a vote. So, sir, I hope that I've dealt with everybody's queries, and I hope that obviously what we achieved in December was a compromise, and so we recognise that compromise is key. And as I stated in my main speech, we will go with whatever the Assembly decides with regards to the date and everything else. I just would like to hope, and I urge members, that they will support these principles so that we can have the debate on the details in these amendments. So, sir, I maintain the principles.
Very much.
Help, please.
Indeed, I'll ask the greffier to place a link into the chat. The vote is on the principles of P17, and I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Could you say it again, please, Referee? Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Whilst the machine is processing, I express the gratitude of the Assembly to the Connétable of St Mary for his contribution to the fund. The fine applies in the normal way. The principles have been adopted. 32 votes pour, 8 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 1 vote contre noted in the chat.
We have the 8, please, sir.
Yes?
And the 32.
Sorry, hang on.
And the 32, 8 and the 32.
Those voting in the link, those voting contre, the Connétable of Grouville, Deputy Guida, the Connétable of St Lawrence, the Connétable of St Bralard, the Deputy of Trinity, the Connétable of Trinity, the Connétable of St Saviour, and the Connétable of St Mary. Those voting pour, the Deputy of St Martin, Deputy Ward, Lahegara, Lewis and Gardner, the Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Ayer, Deputy Martin, Pinnell, Young, Wickenden, Senator Moore, the Deputy of St Juan, Senator Gorst, the Connétable of St John, Deputy Doublé, Alves, Labby, Senator Pallett, Senator Mezek, Deputy Truscott, Morale, the Connétable of St Juan, Connétable of St Peter, Senator Valois, Deputy Southern, the Connétable of St Helier, Deputy Pamplin, the Connétable of St Martin, Deputy Ash, Senator Farnham, and the Deputy of St John. And Deputy Higgins voted in the chat in favour.
Very well. Does the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise the matter, Senator Moore?
No, thank you, sir.
Now we move now to second reading. There are a number of amendments, Deputy Alves. Do you accept any of them?
No, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Very well. Then do you propose Article 1?
Yes, sir. Okay, so Article 1 removes the reference to the 8 senators and provides for the number of deputies to be increased from 29 to 37. This amendment comes into force on the day that will be fixed by law for the next ordinary election. Article 1 also substitutes Schedule 1 to the 2005 law, replacing the current list of deputies' constituencies and specifying the number of deputies to be elected in respect of each constituency. This implemented the decision made by this Assembly in December, and I ask members to maintain that decision. I propose the article, sir.
Is Article 1 seconded?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Very well. There is an amendment lodged by Senator Gorst. Ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 15, Article 1. For Article 1.2, substitute 2 in Article 2.1, Constitution of the States. For 29 deputies, there is substituted 28 deputies. Page 15, Part 2, in the heading to Part 2, after election of, insert senators and. Page 16, Article 3, for the inserted Article 5, substitute, quite a passage for women.
Yes. Would members object to taking this as read? It's a very significant document. Senator Course, do you contend that we take this as read?
Indeed, I am, sir. Yes, thank you.
Very well. Senator.
Thank you, sir. I think that the question that the Assembly is facing today, and it's fair to say that it has faced this question on a number of previous occasions, is one of compromise. And we've heard a number of members, and indeed the chair in her moving of the principles, said that for her, I assume she was speaking on behalf of PPC as well and for PPC, that what had been proposed was a compromise. And I think that is, of course, a fair representation, because there are members of the Assembly who, without a doubt, would like to follow either the Clothier recommendation and have one category of member, or follow up from the Electoral Commission, the electoral observers, and simplify our system to have one category of member. And I have little doubt, sir, that for those members who see what PPC have brought forward as a compromise, they would like to see the office of deputy being that single office where simplicity is at the heart of our system. And the chair also said, sir, and I think one of the issues with this debate is there is a lot of agreement. It is where we draw the line of compromise, because the chair said in her opening remarks that she and PPC, and she is absolutely right to say this, wanted the simplest system and the best system for voters. And we know, sir, that electoral turnout in Jersey is woefully low. And we all wish to see greater engagement in our island's political process, because we've seen throughout the pandemic year that governments and parliaments make life-changing decisions, and therefore we do want to see as many islanders as possible involved in that process. No doubt, so we'll come back and talk in due course about the referendum and other matters as well. There is a school of thought, sir, that says that once one has made the principal decision, which was made and supported, I think with over 30 votes in December, and I supported that vote because I do believe that there needs to be some change to our electoral system. That once one has made that principal vote, one should not, or one should stop making the argument. And yet I think all members know that in reality, if one feels something strongly, if one has been consulted by the electorate and lobbied by the electorate, it is important to continue to make that argument. And whether this amendment and Senator Farnham's amendment stands or falls today, I do think it has been the right thing to have this debate and to have this conversation in our community, because there has been more involvement and I've been approached by more islanders on this matter than I have on a number of them. And so you know that when you're as long in the tooth as I am, it's not very often that you get islanders telling you that that they agree with what you're doing. Often making difficult decisions, it can be the other way around. But I do think that it is right that as we are debating the legislation to change our electoral system, members should have the opportunity to firmly either vote to retain the senators, because that's where their compromise lies, or vote to remove them. This is the piece of legislation that, dependent on the decisions that we make today, that will be the implication. And I think we've seen, sir, and again, the chair said in her opening comments, that people in Jersey care about their representation in this assembly. And I would make the case that islanders care about retaining the senators. So this is not, as some have suggested, a smash and grab or a wrecking amendment, and I'm grateful that nobody today, sir, in the Assembly has made that accusation. It is right that we, as the democratically elected Parliament, the States Assembly, make these decisions on behalf of islanders with their interests at heart and what is best for voters. And so I think, sir, that actually it is a majority view within our community that islanders wish to keep the senators. And I don't just base that on the contact that I've had over the last number of days. But if we go back and look at some of the work that's been undertaken over the years, so I remember being on a PPC with the then Constable of St Clement when I was a very green deputy of St Clement, and we undertook their NIPSOP Moray poll in 2006, and that showed that there was a majority of support for keeping the senators. Even in 2012, the Electoral Commission found that the majority favoured keeping the senators. But we'll come back to why the referendum was held in the way that it was. And then in 2017, the scrutiny panel, I think it was chaired by the now Chief Minister, undertook again an Ipsos Moray poll, and it showed support for the senators. And so it is right that we are having this debate today. For me, sir, the case for retaining the senators is a clear one. It has been said over the past few weeks, and I don't think it's ever stopped being true, that the senators are the fairest and most equitable way of electing members to this assembly. In fact, that I don't think in any of the discourse throughout these days and throughout the years that we've considered these matters, has that been doubted, has that been argued against. 8 votes, which every single elector is able to cast equally for 8 seats. You can't get any more equal than that. The senatorial elections also, of course, give voters a greater say over the makeup of their assembly. That is undeniable as well. If we were to proceed with this reform without the senators, the ability of every voter in Jersey to shape the makeup of our assembly, of their state's assembly, of Jersey's parliament, will be reduced. In turn, Islanders' ability to determine who might hold the role of Chief Minister and other senior roles in government and scrutiny are also diminished. I can't believe that that is good for democracy. So it's quite clear to me, and I've fought now a number of senatorial elections. The electorate have spoken clearly. Sometimes I've liked what they've said about me, sir, in the way that they've positioned me in that poll. Other times it's been more difficult. But I have had to accept, and it is right in a democracy, that those who are elected to the States Assembly are democratically accountable to the public. And I, for one, think, sir, that those who hold the very highest office in our government should be accountable to the entire island. The senatorial election also, of course, allows islanders to come together every 4 years and collectively discuss matters that are of interest to all members of our community, not just parishes or district issues. And I think this is important, sir, because if we look to our sister island, one of the reasons presented to move from the district system that PPC are now simply saying that we should move to was that those districts and the politicians in those districts became too focused simply on parochial issues rather than island-wide issues. And it is one of the reasons why they made the change to the all island-wide mandate. Because the issues that face us as a community are not going away. They are difficult. And we find it difficult as a government and as an assembly to sometimes bring forward meaningful change. But they must be focused on, particularly as we hope to come out of this pandemic period. We will have to pull together right across our community to deliver and secure jobs and a prosperous future for all islanders. A decision to remove the senators risks our collective consideration of these issues and risks reducing the voice of the electorate in shaping our response to them. Of course, that's possible in some parts of the island more than others. The principles of this electoral reform, which I support, are to boost public engagement in politics, increase voter turnout, and achieve greater equity. And I don't think any member today can disagree with those objectives. But if we step back for a moment, they all point to keeping the senators. Senatorial elections boost engagement. They are traditionally more popular among the electorate, and recently certainly as popular as any other election. And they are the most, or they are the pinnacle of equity. Again, so if we look at our sister island, we saw that their electoral turnout went up. And goodness me, what wouldn't we give to have the electoral turnout that they had under their district system? But it went up when they moved from a district system, which we are proposing to go to the all island-wide system. So I don't see how we can make the argument that by removing the office of senator, we will increase voter turnout. And if we're talking about complexity and how difficult our system is to understand, perhaps importantly, the office of senator is the easiest political office to understand. So it doesn't seem logical in any effort to simplify the system that we should remove senators. Because the simplest, easiest to understand is the office that we would be removing. So we would remove the most straightforward, the simplest office to understand, in order to make the overall system less complex. And the more I've thought about that, sir, because like others, as we heard during the principles debate, I have changed my mind. It seems to me illogical that we take the simplest, most democratic office out of our constitutional makeup in order to make the rest of the system seem more simple and increase voter equity. Of course, so it's not my job today to set out what I believe to be the case against the senators. That is for others to do, and PPC have done so in their comments, and I know other members will do so. But I've come to the conclusion that actually it's not an especially strong case. Because arguing that we shouldn't have 3 types of members because it's complicated isn't a case against the senators. Arguing about the nature of hustings meetings, the length of the ballot papers and the number of manifestos is not a case against the senators. Arguing about a single election day is not a case against the senators. And so one of the reasons that I had previously accepted that we could remove the senators, and where I've changed my mind, is because I'd always accepted the argument that you couldn't run an all-Ireland wide system, and therefore you had to try and recreate that in a district system. And so I know we don't like looking to Guernsey, and I least of all like looking to Guernsey. But they have, in their process of their last election, where many of us thought that it would fail, they have fundamentally undermined all of the arguments that have been put forward for why we should remove the office of senator. And so for me, and I know this will not be every member who votes, I hope votes in favour of retaining the senatorial office. For me, the balance of compromise today is maintaining the senatorial office, having large district deputorial seats, maintaining the office of constable, and going to the election in 2022, and we'll come back and we'll talk about the election day, and I think that's the right thing to do. But it's a second issue. It's not this issue. For me, that is where the balance of the compromise should be, and not taking that extra step to remove the office of senator. So I think that this amendment upholds democracy in our island, maintains the influence of the electorate to shape the character of our state's assembly, and by implication our government and our scrutiny functions. It's kept the balance and stability of our assembly, and that has served us well since 1948. We do not have to be like everyone else all around us. It maintains the most democratic political office It is without doubt the easiest office for the electorate to understand. And that's why, sir, I bring forward my amendment today. And I ask members to very, very carefully consider where for them the balance of compromise sits, whilst meeting all of those aims. And whether today is the day that they are going to vote to remove the office of senator from Jersey's electoral system. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is the Second Amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
I haven't noted anyone, I haven't clicked on anyone saying that they wish to speak, because it seems to me we now have to look at the amendment to the Second Amendment, and then people will indicate what they want to speak on, and we'll deal with it in that way, in an ordered way. Deputy Young, clearly we are at this point debating the Second Amendment, and we'll come back to debating it after Senator Farnham's amendment to that Second Amendment has been dealt with. It deals with all of the things contained within the Second Amendment, and therefore only the articles affected by it. And if the Second Amendment were, for example, to be adopted by the Assembly, then Articles 1, 2 and 3 of the main proposition would have to be moved by the chair of PPC as amended, but the Assembly will have decided to accept those amendments. I'm not sure if that's any clearer. It's difficult to be clearer than is actually contained within the draft running order that has been prepared. But if any issues come up again, I'll do my best to address them.
Thank you for clarifying that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. There's an amendment lodged by Senator Farnham to this amendment, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 3, Amendment 1. In Amendment 1, in the substituted paragraph, for 28, substitute 31. Page 4, Amendment 6. In Amendment 6, delete paragraphs C, H, and I. Page 6, Amendment 22. In Amendment 22, for 28, substitute 31.
Senator Farnham.
Yes, thank you, sir. The this amendment is seeks to fully support Senator Gorst's amendment to retain the island-wide mandate, sir, whilst at the same time just changing the makeup of some of the districts, so where I think they could be a little underrepresented by moving by removing one deputy from each of them, as suggested in Senator Gorst's amendment. So my amendment to that amendment, sir, asks that one deputy is added to District 3, sir, St Helier North. One deputy is added to District 8, sir, which is St John, St Lawrence and Trinity, and one deputy added to District 9, which is Grouville and St Martin. I have included a table as part of the report in my amendments, which actually emulates the table that was used in the debate in December, sir. So it follows on that example, but just shows the variance from average in relation to the 9 districts, sir. No doubt some members will try and challenge that in relation to the constables, sir, but I maintain that the constables, sir, are elected by parish, and we know the equity is vastly different, as we have one constable representing St Helier, sir, and one constable representing St Mary's, so the difference between that is substantial. So whenever you add that to any equation, it throws it out, sir. And of course, adding senators makes absolutely no difference because they are voted by the whole island, sir. I think I don't need to go on any further. The amendment is very straightforward, sir, and I'm pleased to propose it. Thank you.
Is the amendment to the amendment seconded? Does any member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I want to start actually by commending Senator Farnham because he is consistent. There can be no doubt about that. He wants to keep the senators, and every time he has an opportunity to bring an amendment to shoehorn them in some fashion, he takes the opportunity. So I commend him for his consistency. So I'd also like to castigate him for his consistency, because every time he does this, he ends up coming up with a proposal that simply doesn't make sense. And that is what this proposal is. Considering it not as an amendment to this proposition, but as a departure from the status quo that we have in our current system, this undoubtedly makes things worse. It increases the number of politicians in Jersey. Good luck squaring that with your constituents. I think most people in the island would shriek in horror at the idea of more politicians. It is simply not necessary in our system. And he's got his numbers completely wrong when it comes to voter equity. If you look at the distribution of deputies which he is suggesting, he is shortchanging St Saviour. St Saviour is the one parish which is represented almost perfectly in terms of the number of representatives it has under the current system. It now goes to being underrepresented. St Clement is underrepresented in the current system. With an increase in members, it becomes even more underrepresented. St Helier, true, it gains one representative, but with the increase in members, still leaves St Helier vastly underrepresented, and distributing further representatives to the country parishes whilst the constables remain in the states has an extremely distorting effect, which puts Jersey into a position where we cannot claim we've made any progress on the issue of fairness. And so I think it has to be, the onus has to be on Senator Farnham to explain just why on earth what he is proposing is an advancement on the current system, because it's extremely difficult to see how maintaining a three-tier category, 3 tiers in the Assembly, which will not make the system simpler. In fact, arguably, it makes the system more complicated because of changing districts. To have the distribution of deputy seats be done in a way which is out of line with population and therefore not addressing the fundamental issue of unfairness. How can he possibly call this a step forward? And does he not understand that those of us who care about fairness in the system are not going to be shut up by this? We're going to keep arguing and saying this is not fair on large numbers of the people of Jersey, his constituents as an elected senator, who live in parts of the island where the power of their vote is diminished because they don't have the level of representation which is universally recognised in every democracy to be based on having a relatively equal number of voters in those districts. So Senator Farnham cannot be criticised for his consistency in wanting to keep the senators. Absolutely right. But if he wants to do that, sir, he should maintain the position that he held in the December debate, which is to just vote against all of this. Nobody will be able to criticise him and say he hasn't acted according to his conscience, because it will clearly be the case that he has done so, sir. But if he wants to advance an argument for change, he needs to advance a much better argument than what he's come up with here, which is worse voter equity than the current system, no progress on simplicity, and increasing the number of politicians in an island that does not need it. So I urge members to reject this amendment.
Very much, Senator. Could I just mention to members in the chamber that any communication requesting to speak or raising any points need to be made through the chat so that they're visible to all members. I've noted, however, Connétable St Mary, your wish to speak, and I've listed you to speak after the Connétable St Martin and before Deputy Gardner, because that's when I noted it. But in future, if more members could indicate in the chat whether they wish to raise any points or speak, so that all other participating members can be aware of it. Deputy Labby.
Thank you, sir, and I'll speak to both amendments. The fundamental claim, oh, I've got an echo again. The fundamental claim in Senator Gorst's amendment is that the office of senator is the most democratic of all the elected offices in Jersey. Therefore, it is perverse for it to be lost. This is untrue. Senators are not more democratic. And having democratic senators isn't worth much if the democratic costs of accommodating them are too great. The central case against reintroducing the role of senator is what it does to the electoral system as a whole. Senator Gorst's case for the senators refuses to acknowledge the central reason for reform. The current system is broken. It has failed. The fact that it has been in place since 1948 is precisely the point. We've kept the same system, and unsurprisingly, we've therefore kept the same problems. Making a small tweak to the deputy elections is not a significant reform. It barely shifts the dial as far as most voters are concerned. In St. Brelade's, for example, am I getting a terrible echo here? I don't know if somebody's mic is on. Does it sound okay?
We don't have an echo here, Deputy. I'm sorry that you do.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you, sir. Let's take St. Brelade's, for example. Instead of voting for 3 deputies across 2 electoral districts, as at present, Senator Gorst's proposal would see 3 deputies in 1 electoral district, plus the senators. Most voters will barely recognise the difference. We need change, not a tweak. If PPC had brought as a proposition what Senator Gorst wants us to end up with today, we'd have been laughed out of court. It's a Jersey fudge. He argues that the election of senators is the fairest and most equal way of electing members of the states. The office is simply unchallengeable, he says, on that point. He is wrong. What he means is that there's no malapportionment with an island-wide mandate. Correct. But meaningless when it comes to judging fairness and equality. Fairness isn't only measured by malapportionment. There are plenty of ways in which the senatorial election could be considered less fair or less equal. For example, the barrier to entry in the senatorial election is high. It costs a lot more to launch a campaign with a chance of success, especially if you don't have a profile, i.e. you're not a sitting member. This is a deterrent to stand. Deputy elections have lower spending limits and therefore are more accessible, a key consideration when measuring democracy. On this measure, deputy elections are fairer. But much worse than that is the effect the senators have on the rest of the assembly. You cannot consider the senators' alleged fairness without considering the whole system. This amendment is presented as if it is a minor add-on to the decision taken before Christmas. The best of both worlds, the new larger districts and the senators as well. And I quote Senator Gorst, without impacting on the fundamental principles of what is achieved through this electoral reform. This is nonsense. The price of reintroducing the senators is to effectively sabotage the PPC reforms, and it does undermine their fundamental principles. Arbitrarily lopping a deputy off each district results in unfairness. Just look at St. Saviour, which is diminished by both this amendment and the amendment to the amendment. Look at Grooville, look at the Old St. Helier 3 and 4. And it returns us to an unnecessarily complex system. Correcting these issues was the whole point of PPC's reforms. This is what you get when one approaches electoral reform from one's own particular perspective. Senator Gorst has botched it. And now we have Senator Farnham as Tonto riding to the rescue of his beleaguered Lone Ranger with 3 extra seats in his saddlebags to partially correct the unfairness. The trouble is, we now suddenly increase the total number of states members, something which was tried and failed in December, and for which there is absolutely no popular support in the island at all. This is the price of trying to save the senators. Distortions everywhere. It is not a coherent, thought-through proposal. Mr. Gorst dismisses the complexity of the current system by arguing that we've had it since 1948. He refuses to acknowledge the disastrous level of voter engagement that we have today. It's a head in the sand, everything's basically fine, just make a small tweak argument, ignoring the fact that our system is ruinously broken. Over and over again, we've been told that the public finds it complex. Complexity is exclusionary. It must end if our central goal is to increase voter participation. Another way in which reintroducing the senators sabotages PPC's reforms is the idea that the senators' election is the appropriate forum in which to discuss island-wide issues and provides an elite of just 8 members who are the qualified ones to discuss the big issues of the day. I've participated in and watched deputies' hustings at the last election and the one before, where every single question from the floor has been on an island-wide issue. And you get a lot more questions at a deputy hustings, and they come round quick, proper scrutiny. The senatorial election is a forum for the consideration of island-wide issues, but the truth is it's not an effective forum. Because 8 senators are elected together, it's difficult to scrutinise their policies. Hustings can involve up to 20 candidates and are widely seen, even by the participants, as a joke. In an evening meeting, you can have a maximum of 3 questions and 20 2-minute answers to them. It's excruciating. What's more, few voters will scrutinise the policies of all 20 candidates. The senator is claiming superiority for the senators over other states members, but this elite position is a fiction. It has no basis in any rule or law. Once elected, all states members have the same votes, rights and privileges. All Mr. Gorst is talking about is recent conventions, such as the convention that the Chief Minister is a senator. These are flimsy foundations on which to build an entire electoral system. There are many circumstances in which these conventions are likely to collapse. Take, for example, the rise of political parties. Imagine a situation where a political party wins the largest number of seats, but its leader is a deputy. They would no doubt nominate that deputy as the next Chief Minister. The other big claim that having the senators in the states increases the total number of votes that a voter is able to cast, and that this is more democratic. It's certainly true that the senatorial election means there are more votes to be cast by individual voters. But once again, there is no basis for describing this as an improvement in democracy. It's a myth. The issue is that the senatorial vote is highly diluted. You get 8 votes, but so does everyone else in the island. Therefore, your vote has proportionately less significance than in a smaller constituency, where there are fewer people voting for their candidates. Look at it this way. Currently, 8 senators are spread between 106,000 people. That's around 1 candidate for every 13,000. In a deputy district, under the PPC proposals, by contrast, it's about 1 candidate for every 3,000 people. Having a tiny say in electing a large number of representatives is no more democratic than having a larger say in electing a smaller number of representatives. The real irony to which Senator Gorst refers is that his proposals that will reduce the greater fairness in our electoral system, which PPC's proposals represent. Here's another. Senators also have historically made up a large proportion of the senior roles in government. Not at the moment, they don't. The saddest element to this is that in performing his U-turn, Senator Gorst has joined the ranks of the Trumpian referendum result deniers. This is what he said in the December debate. I supported option B, and option B, whether we like it or not, won that referendum. Every time one talks about electoral reform and talks of either the need for the status quo or the need for change, quite rightly, members of the public turn around and say, well, we voted in a referendum. And he went on to say, there is a fundamental belief that when you have asked the public a question and you have had their answer, you must enact it. So who are we to believe? Are we to believe the Senator Gorst of December or the Senator Gorst of April? It really doesn't matter, because the facts are these. Given a choice between large electoral districts and keeping the senators, the public chose large electoral districts, 80% to 20%. Given the choice between no change or big change, they chose big change. We know they also want simplicity. Yes, there is some passionate support for the senators, but we also know that is a minority sport. To date, the Save the Senators e-petition, launched in December, has attracted a total of 144 signatures. Where do these senators, Farnham and Gorst, get the idea that the majority of the population wants their retention? That is not borne out by the research that we've done. That is not borne out by the focus groups. That is not borne out by the referendum result, which is the best thing we have to gauge public opinion at the moment. It's a myth. Think back to the after. By the way, there was no clamour for retention of the senators in the election roadshows. There was in the country parishes a very evident clamour for the retention of the constables. Think back to the aftermath of that December debate. It was a stunning result. It actually stunned some people into silence. We were turtles no longer. We put self-interest aside and voted for the good of the island. And the Assembly gained some much welcome respect after that decision in December. It gave people hope and faith. Are we going to throw that all away 4 months later? What will the island make of that? Now, the Assembly is being taken for fools by this amendment, and foolish we will look if either of these amendments go through. I urge members to vote against the amendment to the amendment and vote against the amendment itself. And we said, as Senator Gorst once said himself on the floor of the Assembly in one of these debates, it is time to say farewell to the senators. This is described as a last ditch to save the senators, and a ditch is where this amendment and the amendment to the amendment belongs. Don't we want a clean bill of health for our democracy and for our reputation? Please reject these amendments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I didn't want to interrupt you in full flow, but on 2 occasions you referred to Senator Gorst as Mr. Gorst. It is important to maintain the appropriate titles and description of members provided for within standing orders.
My apologies, sir.
No, but I didn't want to, as I say, interrupt the flow of your contribution. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I'm just going to talk on this particular amendment, so Senator Farnham's amendment. I will talk again when we come to debating whether it will be amended or not, Senator Gorst's amendment. Senator Farnham's amendment recognises the negative impact on voter equity which Senator Gorst's second amendment would have on PPC's proposals if adopted by this Assembly, and he seeks to remedy it. In order to do this, Senator Farnham's amendment to the second amendment seeks to increase the membership of the Assembly by 3, through the addition of extra deputies in 3 of the proposed districts, as well as the retention of senators. The public are not supportive of an increase in our numbers. In December 2020, Deputy Masson of St Saviour's brought an amendment to P139 which advocated 52 deputies across 9 districts. This was rejected 29 votes to 17, despite the fact that it achieved the closest to perfect equity and equality of any reform proposal to date. If the Assembly really wanted to increase its membership and create a far fairer system, then it should have adopted that amendment rather than considering this version, which leaves some districts with disparities in their representation. The Assembly will see a reduction in representation for those living in areas which are currently overrepresented, which will result in them becoming underrepresented. So, for example, the district of St Mary, St One and St Peter and the district of St Brellards will both become 15% and 12% respectively underrepresented if this amendment is adopted, compared to 3% and 0% under the PPC proposals. I therefore urge members not to support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Connétable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I will speak to Senator Farnham's amendment now and Senator Gorst's amendment later. As flattered as I am that Senator Farnham is proposing to grant St Martin and Greville an extra deputy, it is impossible for me to vote in favour of this amendment. Having already agreed the size of the districts, I believe that we should step away from the question of districts and the number of representatives we propose they should have. As part of P139 2020, we agreed to establish an independent boundaries commission to ensure that the districts remain compliant with the principles cited in paragraph A. This is the body that should be responsible for recommending changes to the districts and the numbers of deputies elected. The legislation to establish this body is not yet with the Assembly, but if the Senator is indeed concerned about the equity of the next States Assembly, he always can bring a request to establish the commission before 2022. Indeed, we have just had the 2021 island-wide census. This will provide us with the best possible population data for a decade, which will tell us almost exactly how many people there are in the island and, in tandem, in each district. We should not make changes to the composition until we have the best possible information, and this information is being processed as we speak. If we are concerned about the new districts, we request that the census is used to check the size of the districts and the number of members be returned, and have it independently confirmed whether they are satisfactory. I wish to recommend that members of this Assembly should not, on principle, seek to further alter the number of deputies in this Assembly without strong reasoning from independent, reliable sources. The Senator has not provided this. If there is indeed a deficit in St Martin and Greville, it is essential that the Commission addresses this, but it is not for me to decide. It is only good practice that we allow the debate on this subject to transfer to this Commission. Otherwise, we risk realigning this Assembly as we please without sustained evidence. I would urge members to reject this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Connie Harbison. Mary.
Thank you, sir. I was elected to be the voice of my electorate in the parish of St Mary. I try my best to do that whenever the occasion requires. My electorate are aggrieved, and I would imagine that the electorate of the other 11 parishes are also aggrieved, because they are losing their representation. They are losing the most democratic representation that the old island has, the senators. The island has recently lost 4 senators from the original 12, and we have an element who would like to see them removed completely. The removal of 4 senators was not the electorate's choice. They were not consulted on the matter. The removal of 4 senators was accomplished by an element in this Assembly who believe that they know better than the electorate who they never consulted. The electorate of St Mary, though small in terms of population, are extremely astute when it comes to democracy. It is not democratic that 4 senators have been removed from their voting representation without consultation. This is regarded as dictatorship. There should be no further decrease in the position of senator. In fact, the senator position should be restored to 12. There are those who maintain that all of the States Assembly should be elected island-wide. No need to have parish-based deputies or have large constituencies. Of course, there is a merit in that belief. People are aggrieved that our island constitution can be altered without a democratic vote. The next change will be to encourage the formation of political parties. Jersey is too small to have political parties in the parishes, as parish officials and indeed the constable must remain neutral in order to represent the electorate fairly. The present deputy of the parish elected by the parish electorate has no authority in that parish, something that the electorate of the parish who elected that deputy find very strange and unfair. Therefore, a candidate elected island-wide would provide a greater representation of the electorate and would also dismiss the unequality vote. These elected people would not need to be called senators or deputies. They could be called something different. They very often are called something different now, not always complimentary. We need to restore the respect in our elected representatives. That will not happen until we actually listen to our electorate, the people who we promised to represent, the people who enabled us to represent them. If we did have all-Ireland representation, then political parties could be possible. They may, of course, not be elected. That would leave the 12 constables who already have a very responsible remit in looking after their parish. And there are many options which have not yet been explored. For instance, we could retain 12 senators with the criteria to stand as senator being a previously elected member of the states, which would make voting and indeed the hustings in each parish far simpler, as each candidate would have a political background and reputation. Maybe there should be conditions imposed on constables. For example, not being able to be a minister, assistant minister, or scrutiny chair, or supporting a political party. This would ensure that they remain totally unbiased in support of their parish. The people of this island deserve to be listened to on all changes to the Constitution. Please listen to them on this very important issue of senators by supporting the proposition by Senator Farnham, which echoes the retention of the senators as proposed by Senator Gorst. This and other propositions do not offer a perfect solution, and it may be that if the Clothier report was debated today, it would be accepted. Until a better system is devised, we need to accept that this is the best we can achieve at the moment. Any future changes should not be dismissed on logistical notions. Logics can be made to work, as in evident by the Guernsey election, in which all politicians were elected on the same day. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Connétable. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And listening for previous speaker, I agree. We need, on one point, we need to restore respect and trust from the public. One of the way doing it is to stick with our decisions and not to have endless debate with our decision and changing decisions all the time, because this debate has been done in December and we all thought that the decision was made. I commend and respect Senator Gorst and Senator Farnham, and I applaud their persistence in fighting till the last moment to retain the senators by lodging these amendments. And I will speak once on both amendments, even though that were only 3 votes supporting retention of the senators at the previous debate. I do agree with Senator Gorst, the islanders care about senators. I agree they do, but they are much more unhappy with inequality of their votes, at least in my district. Electoral reform is always resisted by some. In the USSR, those in power fought tooth and nails to retain their power. Only a fair and equal democracy can claim that a system that favors others, they cannot claim that a system that favors others and over the others is better. It's ridiculous. To put tradition over democracy or habit or convenience is again ridiculous. The state members with an equal size electorate and equal power is a perfect democracy. The compromise, we all compromised, And the compromise of keeping constable is the closer to a perfect democracy than we were before. And it's really good compromise. My previous decision has not changed. I will be consistent in my voting and support original PPC proposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Firstly, we really all must acknowledge the initial work by PPC in bringing P126, seems like an eternity ago, early last year. I mean, it took up the reins of the recommendations of the CPA Election Observers Mission that oversaw those elections we all stood in 2018. The headline recommendations, and this is well rehearsed, were voter equality, reduced complexity, and voter engagement. And in fairness, it really was a great and well-researched study and subsequent propositions. It didn't, however, meet with, amongst others, the approval of the country parishes. They liked their dedicated deputies, but most of all, there was a strong desire to maintain the constables taking their seat in the Assembly. It also didn't meet the fairest and most equitable of all members. Senatorial elections are mathematically perfect, and I cannot understand any challenge to that statement. Senators also give the whole island their chance to elect a member who is likely, I know not always, but likely to seek high office. All past chief ministers have come from the senatorial ranks. What I fear happened last year was lacking in two fundamental ways. One was timing. P39 was debated on the 1st of December 2020. This was the sitting after the vote of no confidence and around the time of the hospital site selection. Including the constant attention duly and rightly given to COVID, it is hardly surprising that, in the eyes of the public, this, shall we say, was sneaked in under the radar. This has been borne out by the many recent letters in the JEP and the numerous calls from concerned parishioners that I have received. The second was compromise. It is clear for all to see that the only way to get this through was to secure the constable's vote. Ironically, the most inequitable of all our members. And I say this as a supporter of keeping the constables in the Assembly. However, I didn't support this change. Why? Quite simply, as has already been rehearsed, this is one of the most important decisions we will make. Is it easy? Obviously not. Otherwise, the ideal situation would have been presented and adopted years ago. However, should we just accept something because it is merely a bit easier, but nowhere near ideal? I attest not. In business, you would go back to the drawing board, taking with you the lessons learned and return having acknowledged and addressed those concerns in completion. Yes, it can be an iterative loop, but it is a process that is proven to work. Now, a real and valid question is, has the island ever been asked the direct question, do we want to do away with senators? I sense when asked bluntly, the answer is no, in exactly the same way that we are here today supporting the constables in the Assembly. When push came to shove, it was clear the island wants them. In summary, I'm in support of these amendments. I'll vote for both. However, I'm inclined to prefer the amendment lodged by Senator Gorst, mainly because I don't feel, nor do the island, that we need more elected representatives. So where is my compromise? I stood in the 2018 to represent my parish, the parish where I have close connections going back for generations. Should, after the amendment, we vote to keep senators, I will support the change to larger constituencies and vote accordingly. I will then, if invited at the 2022 elections, share my role and passion with the wonderful residents of St Mary and St Juan and fully engage in the spirit of change. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. Colin Harbour St John.
Thank you, sir. Well, here you go again, or should I say, we go again. Whilst this is my first debate on this subject in the Assembly, just how many times has this subject been discussed? Who could have thought that after the votes had been counted and the results declared on the eve of the 24th of April 2013, that this Assembly would still be discussing the way forward about implementing the results some 8 years and 2 general elections later. Having been heavily engaged in the campaign for option B, I have first-hand experience as to just how much effort was put in by each of the campaign teams, especially the A and B teams who both wanted a fairer system and worked extremely hard to achieve it. Whilst new to this chamber, I have been involved in many, many election campaigns spanning almost 40 years. Sir, what I heard from apathetic voters on that campaign trail in 2013, and indeed on numerous campaigns that I've been a part of, will no doubt be familiar to members. When asking voters why they have chosen not to vote, why they don't want to get engaged, you always hear the same responses. My vote doesn't matter. They, meaning us, never listen. We've seen in our island dwindling turnouts at elections and the levels of apathy far above most comparable jurisdictions. So the campaign with the highest turnout that I've been involved with being almost 80% in St John in 1994. We need to get back to that level of engagement to be able to say we have succeeded. So it's all well and good for those of us who are engaged in the political process to respond to such sentiments by explaining that their votes do matter, by saying every citizen has a responsibility to vote. But I'd ask members to take a moment and stand in the shoes of those who are apathetic towards our democracy. How are their votes on election day transformed into policies pursued by this Assembly? How, when over 80% of voters supported either A or B in that 2013 referendum, only for the Assembly to do nothing? Worse than doing nothing, this amendment and previous proposals like it have gone completely against what the electors said. Electors who took the time and trouble to vote and tell us what they actually wanted. We should not forget that option C in 2013 was to retain the role of senator, but that only polled 19% of votes. These results are very different to Senator Farnham's protestation that removing senators is against public opinion. 19% in 2013. It also confirmed that we should have fewer members and not more, as suggested by the amendment to the amendment. How, when time and again, politicians are elected promising electoral reform only not to deliver. As Deputy Alves said earlier, it's within our grasp to demonstrate we are listening. Sir, there are always tweaks and improvements that can be made to any electoral system. The original Green Amendment, as it was called, was a slight tweak on the original, but in my view, improved things. This amendment goes against what the public was asked. We could look into online voting, increase support for candidates, or a whole range of other suggestions, but none of these will promote greater turnout on their own. Fundamentally, the only way we can increase turnout is to prove to those would-be voters that their choice at election time does matter, that manifestos are not just empty promises, that we as elected members will follow through on the public's wishes. Sir, the public have voted to keep the constables in the state. They have voted to redraw electoral districts and increase the fairness in the representation. Sir, it is time we finally deliver on those wishes. The loss of trust isn't just from those who voted in favour of the proposal before us. People who voted A to remove the constables and people who voted C and didn't want change have also lost trust, all because this Assembly continuously failed to carry out the result of the referendum. There are numerous examples of where trust has been broken in recent years between the electors and this Assembly, examples too numerous to list today. In my experience, trust is hard won and easily lost. We have an opportunity to start rebuilding that trust today. This amendment, well intentioned I'm sure, should be rejected soundly. A look at the current 8 senators sees just 3, yes 3, who are members of the Council of Ministers. That is not what I and many Islanders signed up for in 2018 when going to the polls. An Ireland mandate should have given you a seat around the Council of Ministers table. We have scrutiny panels with the same amount of senators on a panel, and yet we're told how senators hold senior positions. Really? As mentioned before by Deputy Lavey, the online gov.je petition launched just over 100 days ago on the 8th of January, and despite having members of the government as some of its first signatories, has gained 144 signatures at the start of today's debate. This compares with 3,718 for a petition to introduce Freddie's Law launched on a similar date. Does that tell you the public want to retain senators? Senator Goss says Islanders care about the role of senator. Sir, it tells me the public have lost interest and want to see us finally take action that should have been taken for the last 8 years. I believe that this proposal can and will strengthen the parish system. The constables have a role to play in this, and I'll be working my hardest to make a difference and to ensure the role of constable is and remains relevant as the vital parish link to this assembly. Senator Gorse referred to Guernsey. Well, recently 119 candidates stood for the first All-Ireland election. People thought it couldn't be done. People thought it would be a circus, the paper would be too big, etc., etc. Sir, having actually managed one of the successful deputies' campaigns in that election, I can tell you it wasn't a circus and there were very few issues with the voting paper. Postal votes got used extensively and technology was used to good effect in the counting, something proven with their recount. We can learn from this ahead of next year's election. Hustings events got held, and importantly, voter turnout increased. The new election system saw an 8% rise in turnout in Guernsey. Almost 80% of those on the electoral roll voted. As I mentioned earlier, something we haven't seen since around '94. If the senator and those who support this amendment are so keen on the island-wide mandate, then why not an amendment to have 36 senators and no deputies? This would have achieved voter equality in the same way the proposed districts achieved voter equality. Sir, I haven't joined this assembly to waste time. I want to work with colleagues to find solutions and focus on the real issues. As a keen observer for many years, I can tell fellow members that the public are right to think the assembly spends far too much time speaking about itself. It has got to stop. Sir, in closing, if I can take members back to where I started, back to the 24th of April 2013. On that day, over 80% of Islanders who went to the polls voted for change, with just 19% supporting the retention of senator. Importantly for me, sir, on that day, over 75% of the St John's parishioners who went to the polls actually voted for change. They supported option B, with as many votes being gained in St John for B as there were for A and C combined. I have no hesitation in rejecting this amendment, and I would urge members to do the same. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conectad. I see that the adjournment is proposed. We have only a minute to go before the normal time for the adjournment. Adjournment is proposed. Any member oppose? No, very well. The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:15.